Mike and Jerry destroy Mark and Diva's copper. Still, after $20,000, Shine run the small, secretive moonshine operation in the backwoods of Appalachia was always a place where the unexpected could happen. Between the rough hills and secluded hollows, the air smelled of wood smoke and fermenting corn, a sharp contrast to the usual quiet of the region. And like any hidden part of the world, it was a place where competition bred tension, and no one felt it more than Mike and Jerry, two Moonshiners who'd been rivals of Mark and Digger for years. That fateful night, however, the simmering animosity would reach its boiling point, with consequences neither side could ever have imagined. It all started with a successful run, one that Mark and Digger had been working toward for months. Their copper Stil, nestled deep in a hidden cove, was the best they had ever built. They'd poured everything into perfecting it, refining the copper coils, testing the mash for purity, and ensuring that each drop of shine was nothing short of perfection. Their last run had yielded over $20,000 in product, a considerable amount for any moonshine operation. But in the world of moonshining, success often comes with a price, and Mark and Digger had long known the dangers of attracting attention. Mike and Jerry, two notorious moonshiners from a neighboring holler, had always been jealous of Mark and Digger's ability to consistently turn out quality shine. Though they tried to sabotage them in the past, leaving rotten corn by the Stil, cutting their supply lines, and spreading rumors, the last $20,000 haul was the straw that broke the camel's back. Mike and Jerry, frustrated by their inability to outshine their rivals, had finally decided it was time to take matters into their own hands, in a way that would leave no room for Mark and Digger to bounce back. The night had fallen swiftly, with the shadows wrapping around the old trees like a cloak. Mike and Jerry had been planning for weeks, studying Mark and Digger's movements, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. With the moon hanging high in the sky, the two men silently made their way through the woods toward the hidden Stil. They knew the layout like the back of their hands, every turn and path memorized over the years of rivalry. "We gotta make sure we leave no trace," Mike whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Jerry, always the more calculating of the two, nodded. "We hit them hard, hit them fast. If we leave anything behind, they'll come looking for us. We can't let them get a single drop of shine from this place." They arrived at the clearing where the Stil stood, the copper coils glinting eerily in the moonlight. The fire under the pot was still smoldering, and the smell of fermented corn hung heavy in the air. It was the perfect moment for their plan to unfold. Mike pulled a bag of tools from his jacket and began methodically disassembling parts of the Stil. The copper pipes were delicate, intricate, built to last, but Mike knew exactly where to strike. He twisted and turned the tools with practiced hands, severing crucial connections, breaking the seals that held the Stil together. The sound of metal scraping against metal was faint but sharp in the still night, enough to send a shiver down Jerry's spine. Jerry walked over to the barrels that held the shine, peering into the dark liquid. His fingers danced over the edges, calculating how much they had left, how much Mark and Digger had produced before they'd left for town. $20,000 worth of shine. He muttered under his breath, almost as if to savor the victory. "We're not just wrecking their Stil, Mike. We're destroying everything they worked for. All of it's going up in smoke." Mike glanced up from his work and grinned. "Hell yeah. They think they can take the crown. Well, it's time to show them who's boss around here." Back at their own camp, Mark and Digger were finishing up a much-needed break after their run to town. They had no idea their rivals were closing in, waiting to destroy everything they had built. Mark lit a cigarette and stretched out on the weathered porch, while Digger cleaned the last of the tools from their successful run. They were exhausted, but proud. They had something special, and the taste of success lingered in the air like the fading burn of moonshine on the tongue. "It's been a hell of a day, Digger," Mark said, taking a long drag on his cigarette. Digger nodded, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Yeah, we might actually get ahead of the game for once." They had no idea how wrong they were. Their victory was about to be short-lived, and the wreckage left behind by Mike and Jerry would be more than just a physical one. The fire in the woods crackled as Mike and Jerry stood over the remains of Mark and Divers Stil, their work complete. The copper tubes lay bent and twisted on the ground, the main pot shattered into jagged shards. The barrels of shine had been tipped over, spilling out and seeping into the earth. It was a complete and utter ruin, a message that would be impossible to ignore. Jerry wiped his hands on his pants, breathing heavily from the exertion. "This'll hurt them, Mike. It's not just the shine. It's everything. They'll be done for after this." Mike glanced at the destruction they had caused. "They won't know what hit 'em. And once word gets out, the whole hollow will know who's the real king of these hills." They shared a grim smile, satisfied with their work. The faint glow of the fire reflected off the twisted remains of the Stil, casting a dark shadow over the woods. The next morning, Mark and Digger returned from their trip to town, unsuspecting of the destruction waiting for them. As they made their way through the woods, Mark noticed something odd. The usual sounds of the forest were quiet, too quiet. He glanced at Digger, who was already eyeing the trail ahead, his expression changing from casual to concerned. "You notice anything strange, Digger?" Mark asked, a knot forming in his stomach. Digger's eyes narrowed as they approached the clearing. "It's too damn quiet," he muttered. They reached the clearing and froze. The sight before them was beyond belief. There still was a mangled mess, the copper twisted and ruined. The barrels of shine lay overturned, the contents spilled and wasted on the earth. Mark's breath caught in his chest, and Digger's hands clenched into fists. "What the hell happened here?" Mark whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. Digger let out a low growl. "Mike and Jerry." It was clear as day now. There was no other explanation. Their bitter rivals had finally crossed the line. In a single night, they had destroyed everything Mark and Digger had worked for, and it was all gone. The $20,000 haul, the hard work, the sweat, they'd all been for nothing. The feeling of betrayal stung harder than any loss they had ever known. But Mark wasn't one to back down. Digger wasn't either. "We're not done," Mark said, his voice cold. "We rebuild. And when we do, we'll make sure Mike and Jerry know they made the wrong move." Digger nodded, determination flashing in his eyes. "We'll show them. They think they've won. Hell, this is just the beginning." Mike and Jerry thought they had won. They thought the destruction of Mark and Divers Stil would put an end to their competition. But they had underestimated the resilience of their rivals. Mark and Digger didn't take kindly to being pushed around, and now they had a fire in their hearts that would drive them to rebuild their operation even stronger than before. The backwoods of Appalachia were about to get even more dangerous, and the rivalry between Mike and Jerry, Mark and Digger, was far from over. In the world of moonshining, nothing was ever as simple as it seemed, and the price of success was often more than anyone bargained for. Mike and Jerry destroy Mark and Digger's copper, Stil after $20,000, shine run the moon, hung high over the Appalachians, casting long shadows across the dense woods. A faint mist swirled through the trees, the kind of night that whispered of secrets and danger. Deep within these hills, where the law didn't tread and the air smelled of burning wood and fermented corn, two rival moonshining operations existed side by side, constantly at odds. For years, Mark and Digger had been known as the kings of the hills, their shine as smooth and potent as any that came out of the region. But Mike and Jerry, a younger pair of upstarts, had been gunning for their throne. The latest blow-up had come after Mark and Diva's most successful run ever, one that netted them $20,000 in profit. And that's where the story truly begins. It all started with a quiet night at Mark and Digga's makeshift Stil. They'd just finished the latest batch, the copper gleaming under the light of the flickering lanterns. Their latest run had been nothing short of a miracle, 20 barrels of the finest shine they'd ever made. The smell of sweet corn and barley hung in the air, mingling with the smoke from the nearby fire. The two men, dressed in worn-out denim and old boots, looked over the fruits of their labor with a sense of pride. Mark leaned back on a stack of firewood, savoring the taste of the homemade whiskey in his flask. "Hell, Digga, this one's the best we've done yet. 20 grand worth of shine. We're set for a while." Digga, ever the more stoic of the two, nodded slowly. "Don't get too comfortable, Mark. You know how things work out here. It won't take long before word gets out, and when it does, you can bet Mike and Jerry will be watching." Mark chuckled and took another swig. "Let 'em watch. They can't touch us. We've been doing this longer than they've been breathing." But Digga's face grew serious. "It's not about how long we've been at it, Mark. It's about being ready. We've made enemies, and they're just waiting for us to slip." Mark grunted, the weight of his friend's words sinking in. "I know, but this..."